Hello. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Doc is In. So, last episode, we talked a little bit about giving yourself the clearance and the okay to feel how you feel. This episode is going to be a little bit different. Excuse me, I had to move the mic. So, this episode is going to be a little bit different. I want to talk about some signs that someone may be a toxic person and how to deal with them. And I'm going to do this from the point of view of colleagues and coworkers. But when I say colleagues, I'm going to give a specific example, but I want to kind of give some backstory. So let me start off with a few signs that someone's toxic. Okay, so whenever we're talking about toxic people, we're talking about people that, everyone tries to avoid them. They are just that person that really makes work, school, whatever, unbearable. It's one of those things where it's like if my only option was to be around them or to be completely by myself, then by myself it is. Um, so, one of the types of toxic traits that you'll notice is narcissism. That's a really big one. When you're dealing with someone who's arrogant, self absorbed, they have this very unearned sense of superiority, grandiose ideas about themselves, that kind of thing, or they're conniving. They're trying to be cunning about like setting people up, that kind of thing. Um, Power games, control type stuff, and you see that mostly in toxic leaders, where all they want to do is constantly remind everybody that they're in charge. And to speak to that, one of the big things is I'll say this: you find that in managers. You don't find that in leaders. You find that in managers because managers can manage, and managers have a position. Leaders influence and inspire, and leaders have people. There's a very clear and distinct difference. So you find that in toxic managers, where it's all the power and control stuff. Um, when somebody cannot hear an idea that they didn't come up with, again, toxic management. Things like isolation, favoritism, where it's like one or two people will be singled out and just constantly, focused on for something that, you know, really is one of those things where it's like, okay, in real life, basically you're holding a grudge. Call that what it is. Just the lies, the manipulation, sketchy morality. Again, not being able to hear feedback is a huge red flag. Whenever you're someone who's in charge and you can't hear feedback, or you pretend to listen to it, but you hear it, but you don't listen to it. Um, if you always find yourself as a leader, as a coworker, saying, "What did you say? What did you say?" and asking the same question a million times, you need to start to listen. That's definitely a big one. So, um, in saying all of this, what I want to discuss is I have a colleague. We are not friends at all. And I can say that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being honest and living in your truth. We are not friends. I honestly think she's a kind of despicable person. Um, we've only had very few run-ins, but as a clinician, I can clearly see an axis two personality happening there. Every time I've been in her presence, it's very draining. Um, it's way too much. The thing that I notice about her is nothing is ever her fault. Even when it clearly is, it's never her fault. Um, my first interaction with her happened in a classroom setting where I was discussing a case study with a different colleague. And we were having a discussion that was pertinent to what we were talking about. No one was talking to her, but she apparently took offense to the case presentation that I was giving. And begin to go on this really weird rant and diatribe about how I had prejudged the child. Now, bear in mind, she's not seen the child at all. I only worked with him for over a week, but neither here nor there. Oh, I prejudged the child. I had, it's because of clinicians like me that kids grow up, blah, 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 blah. Okay, sure, whatever. Now, because we're in a professional setting, I'm not going to respond to her as I would like to, which would have been really, really base level, because she's the kind of person that you can't really take a high road with. It's clear that she lives in the basement of life, so you have to go down there to really get to her eye to eye. But I'm sorry, I just don't stoop that low. It's not necessary. And I encourage some of you to understand that as well. And we're going to get to how to deal with toxic people. 1 second, stay with me. But what happened was I reported the incident because I felt like it needed to be reported, because I, as a social worker and a clinician and a therapist, teach people to uphold their boundaries. And I also teach people to advocate for themselves. And I don't think it's fair that I should be in a professional environment dealing with someone with this level of unprofessionalism. Well, more recently, and I'm going to put a picture up here. It's going to be a screenshot so that you can see it. I want to show you an email that was sent out to myself and all the members of our class, including our professor. This was probably the most unprofessional thing I've ever seen in my life, and it shows the kind of diminished intellect that you're dealing with. In life, and I encourage all of you to really think about this, in life, grace. Social grace means a lot. I'm avoiding saying the person's name only because I don't think it's necessary to say it. She'll probably never see this. No need to shame her or anything like that. But I want to point out something. If this is the kind of message that you have to send out to a professor and colleagues, this shows that you need to work on yourself quite a bit. There's no need at all to ever send out a professional communication with expletives in it. There's no need to insult a group of people who, most of whom have had no interaction with you. But when you're dealing with someone who is toxic and who has access to, oftentimes there can be a lot of collateral damage. And there are people who get insulted who had no part in the situation. So how do you deal with toxic people? I'm glad you asked. You people are so wonderful. And I'm going to try and wrap this up real quick because I want to stay within that 7 to 8, 9 minute window. The first thing is avoid playing into their reality. I know you're tempted to coddle because they're always a victim. Don't. Just be respectful and say, I see it differently, and move on. Don't get drawn into it. Resist the urge to just defend yourself against their accusations, or to just fall down that pigeonhole. As I mentioned, generally these people live in life's basement. We're not trying to go down there, so just avoid it if you can. Pay attention to how they make you feel, though. That's the biggest thing. Don't allow what they say to affect you personally. And don't get me wrong, and this is one of the biggest things I will always say. A lot of times when you're dealing with people like this who are very likely access to, they're going to give you 101 reasons why they behave the way they do. Poor behavior is never excused by your past. I'm sorry. That personal struggles don't excuse abuse, and just like you don't have to take it, I don't have to take it. You don't have to deal with anyone's poor attitude. You don't have to deal with their verbal abuse, emotional abuse. You never have to deal with that. And don't ever accept, well, I was abused when I was younger. I went through this, or I have bipolar disorder, or I have ADHD, whatever they may have, whatever they may be suffering with. Do not give them that out. Because mental illness is no excuse for poor conduct. Mental illness is no excuse for being abusive, being rude, being crass. There's no excuse for that. That's just you having a lack of social grace. That is you being rude and common, however you want to look at it. It's just that, Don't ever excuse it. Now, one thing I will say is this. Try to talk to people about their behavior, but always understand something. People can only understand from their level of perception. So if you talk to someone and using your I feel statements, I feel uncomfortable when you say those types of things in front of me, whatever. When you speak to someone like that, if they even try to understand, they may make some changes. But everyone is not ready to make changes. Everybody does not see that a change needs to be made. So if they don't respond to it, so be it. You move right along. It's beautiful. Put yourself first, okay? Put yourself first. You have to take care of yourself, especially in times like these. And that also means making sure that you have enough emotional energy just to deal with your own life. And if you're giving all of your emotional energy away to someone who is probably undeserving of it and who won't ever give you anything in return that's worthwhile, move on. Just move on with it. You can be compassionate to someone from a distance. You can be compassionate and not try and fix them, but oftentimes we just have to say no and walk away. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to listen to you. Excuse me, and walk away. And that's all right. And guess what? It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And you're not blaming them. You're just walking away and making yourself unavailable. So I want to encourage you all to set your boundaries. Hold your boundaries. Love yourself. Love someone else. Because we'll all be better for it.